criticized. And
Right.
um, got it. And so it's like, well, all right, like that's no problem. If they don't want criticism, then I'm not going to be the one to give it to them. But if they're open to being told my opinions, then yeah, I mean, it can be hard. It's a very difficult thing to take
Right.
somebody else's
I mean,
opinions.
yeah, I mean, it is a difficult thing. And in the comic book medium in particular, I mean, like I've tried to write for comics and things like that. And, you know, a big part of the draw to write comics, right, is like it's really, your name is kind of on the marquee, like
Yeah,
you're up there, it's just like it's a very it's a really real declaration creatively of like I did this,
yeah,
and
and
like
it's vulnerable. Yeah, and it's hard to get over that fear of criticism or taking it personally, where you feel like, oh, I'm being criticized. It's criticizing me and my identity.
yeah.
Matt Diffie did that for me when I first started trying to get in the New Yorker. He gave me criticisms, and I had to make a decision. Do I take these to heart and try to improve myself, or do I feel like he's full of crap and just ignore what he's and I
Right.
chose to sort of rebuild, because at that point I had already done stuff for the Onion and
Oh,
all the indie
I
comics and
I
stuff.
you know what, you might have mentioned that to me, that you worked for the Onion. And I can't believe oh my gosh, that's a great one. All right, I should probably do an intro for our listeners.
Sounds good.
You're listening to the Lemon Drop Sessions, a podcast about food and music. I am the unreluctant host, Will PB. I'm here with Shannon Wheeler. Uh, in music, everybody is all about um, independent productions these days, right? It's all about how much money you can make if you go independent in the music field. And in the world of comic books, the independent field is a very attractive idea to a lot of up and coming comic book creators and writers and artists. And I can say pretty definitively that Shannon Wheeler is one of the best stories in American independent comic books. I mean, you really must be one of the best stories that is out there in American independent comic books in history. So I am really pleased to have Shannon Wheeler on. So Shannon has his own original character, Too Much Coffee Man. Uh, I believe I did actually research this. The first issue came out in 1994, right?
Um, yes and no. I did
Okay.
mini comics, and I think I started Too Much Coffee Man maybe in 91, or I think 91 was the first mini comic I put out. But yeah, the first comic book I think was
Wow.
either 93 or 94. Probably I went to San Diego and I was like, oh, I need to have a comic book out by next year. And so um
Wow.
I had mini comics and then
You need
just
to
did
have
the
a
full
comic
one.
book out by next year, and you met that goal. Just
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it was interesting because I'd solicited, I'd drawn some of it, and I had written the script, and then I went to San Francisco to see some show or something, and somebody broke into the car and stole
Wow.
my backpack that had everything. So then I had this very tight deadline of having to rewrite it and redraw it.
Wow.
I don't know why I had it all in my backpack. Probably because I thought I was on deadline and I needed to work on it at all times.
Yeah.
But then rewriting it, I think I
Yeah.
streamlined it and it made it better. So, you know,
Yeah. I have to agree. I mean, so I've written a few comic book scripts. I haven't published anything, but I did notice a trend of, the second draft is actually kind of better in terms of a comic book script. It's just I mean,
and
who
if you
would
don't
have
have the first one to refer to, then you have to do everything by memory and you naturally lose a lot of the kind of weird self-indulgent things that you had put in the first draft.
Right, right. So I just want to drop this in real quick. I got the chance to talk to Shannon once before in 2021. Sort of had to scrap the episode due to technical difficulties, and I was able to reach back out to Shannon, and he knew me from before. I'm very pleased to say, and he came back for another talk. I'm
Always
so
a pleasure. I love it.
Thank you, man. I mean, yeah, me too, definitely. Um, so I don't quite know where to start. Shannon Wheeler, his original character, Too Much Coffee Man. What I was trying to say is, this character, an original character, Too Much Coffee Man, has been around for almost 30 years, basically. It has been around for 30 years. You know? I mean, yeah, it's amazing. It's totally, I mean, it's inspiring, it's interesting, and it's a piece of history that frankly I don't think people really know enough about. Yeah,
Well, thank you.
you're a comic book guy, man. You're really up there. And so yeah, so we had to come up with sort of a music segment for this episode, and Shannon Wheeler agreed to humor me in the best possible way. I asked him if he would make a conceptual soundtrack to a film version of the Fantastic Four, right? I can't believe we're going to do this. I'm so excited. So Shannon agreed. He said, "Sounds good. I'll start coming up with the Fantastic Four soundtrack, for a hypothetical Fantastic Four movie." And sort of the impetus for that, I guess, was in our first conversation. We got to talk about Fantastic Four, about what we would do with these characters in the comic book medium, and so on and so forth. And in the back of my mind, really, I'm like, this is the best. I mean, I'm talking to another comic book creator about what we would do with the Fantastic Four. Um, that was such a fun conversation for me. I mean, it was the best. And actually the reason I oh shoot. All right. I got everything fuddled up, but basically in soon, very soon, we will get into Shannon Wheeler's Fantastic Four soundtrack. And I'm very pleased to present that on this episode of the Lemon Drop Sessions. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out with me on that, Shannon. So there's so much else we can talk about. I mean, your contributions to the New Yorker alone. You had a magazine that you did with Marvel Comics. I'm correct, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I did a magazine. I did 10 issues of Too Much Coffee Man, and then was trying to figure out how to open it up into newsstand, and I thought kind of a win-win would be to turn it into a magazine and then include ads because that would subsidize it, and then have a new distribution into it. It sort of worked.
Mm-hmm.
Creatively, I loved it because it also took it from being a solo adventure of just me doing a comic to all of a sudden pulling in friends and having weird, stupid ideas. And
Right.
yeah, just getting to work with people is really a pleasure.
It is
Um,
definitely. Yeah. Forming a team for a brand new project. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, and then you can pull in like, oh, here's some cool comics, and here's somebody that I really like, and you pull them in, and it made really good connections in a real positive way for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes as kind of connections sort of collect, you do kind of forget that you actually met the person the way you met them, it's like,
hmm
oh yeah, we did this or that or the other thing together, like
Mark
blah blah.
Russell, I liked he did a zine called the Superman Stories, and then I was able to
Oh,
start
wow.
reprinting some of his zine work, and then we ended up doing the Bible together. We're rewriting the Bible. He did all the work of of the rewriting of the Bible, and then I did gag cartoons in
Right,
there.
right, right. So
And that was great.
I should throw in we will get to the Fantastic Four soundtrack soon, but I should throw in that you are developing a new Kickstarter campaign, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. What I'm wanting to do, I did one already where I collected all the early Too Much Coffee Man books. So the
Right,
first, 10 books I put into a single volume, and
right.
now I'm putting the second volume together. So it's all I
Wow.
did some ads for a bookstore early on with Too Much Coffee Man. I did mini comics. Um, I did a anthology
Wow.
with friends of mine called Jab, and there's a couple Too Much Coffee Man stories in there. And then we have one that we shot with a gun. Um, it was a gimmick because
Oh yeah.
all these comic books were doing gimmicks, and they all had like foil covers or a hologram cover. And so we thought, oh, what's a gimmick we could do? And then the constraints were it it like
Right.
doing a hologram was adding 25 50 cents a book, so that's out. So it needs to be
Okay.
affordable, it needs to be funny. Like doing something somebody else had done was off the table. We didn't want to
Wow.
do a
Okay.
foil because everybody was doing a foil. So we
Right.
thought, what could we do that nobody's done, to
Right.
affordable, original, um and doable. Like we have to be able to do it. And so it was my buddy Ashley who was working on the book. There's four of us working on the book together, and he said, "Let's just shoot it with a gun." And and
Hmm.
then it's interesting because there's four of us drinking beer together, and immediately the amount of resistance to an idea is like, "Oh, we can't do that," and all the reasons why we couldn't do it. It's too expensive, and store owners will think it's damaged and they'll send it back. A kid will imitate it and shoot himself and will get sued. There's always a lawsuit. It's
So are you
always
saying
that's
you shot every single issue with a gun? Or
yes, yeah, yeah, and then, yeah, it was like, oh, we can't do. So and we in Texas, a couple guns and rifles around. So we are like, oh, let's just go in the backyard and we pile up some comics and test it, and we could put them in stacks of about 10, and that's just with a 22 long, like a rifle, and
uh-huh.
it goes through pretty good. And it's like, okay, 3,000 books or 5,000
They were
books,
still
whatever.
readable, like totally readable, but there's just a bullet
We
hole in every
yeah,
page.
we did the story to go around the bullet hole, and so as can we get it in the right spot every time? And so the answer was yes to all these things. And then 5,000 books, that's 500. It was very doable. 500 shots, and then each one
Wow.
takes a minute. It'll
Wow.
take three hours.
Wow.
um but yeah,
So
then the bullet worked in with the story, so that like Too Much Coffee Man he's in his
wow.
house and the police are there shooting into his house, so like his mug gets shot. Then the mug on his head is
No.
shot. The window is shot out. I
Oh,
had a
come on.
Elvis
That's
decanter
crazy.
that got shot. I had a Kennedy decanter, but I
Oh my gosh.
resisted. I out of good
I
taste. I
cannot
just
believe this. I
so
cannot. That's amazing. Okay. That's the selling point right there. Um,
we called it the stupidest gimmick ever. Um, that's what we
yeah.
called it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you know, I think a trait of a lot of the great comic book creators, right, is actually that the reward is in reading the book, like there's so much in there, like everything is on the table. I mean, you get, fun, cool, like front page cover style artwork to start the book. And usually with uh with books such as, yours, on par with yours, there's some cool, pictures at the end, at the back of the book, and little excerpts and explanations of
Letters.
things, letters,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
always got a lot of letters
letter.
from prisoners because of my
Mhm.
name, and it was before the internet, and so they thought I was female, and so I would get fan mail.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I'd always run these
That's oh my God.
prisoner mail, a lot of poetry.
I mean, yeah, yeah, okay. Okay. I mean, that's honestly, that's a TV series right there. I mean, that's where your
And,
TV
and
series
then,
comes in.
and then, and doing the magazine, then one of the guys that I actually wrote back because I liked his letter, and he didn't think I was a woman. I mean, but we were
Yeah,
corresponding some, Bobby Hopper, and then when I started the magazine, I had him be do an advice column. So we would send him
nice,
questions for advice, and
nice.
then he would write. It
Oh
was
wow. Oh wow. That's great,
advice
man.
column from prison. Do as I
That
say,
is
not
so
as I
good.
do, I think is what we called it. I can't remember.
Oh man, that's a great one. And that story sounds great. I will definitely pick it up. So I was and let's talk about some of the Too Much Coffee Man merch that is already out there. Because there is a Too Much Coffee Man omnibus, right?
Hmm.
Am I
Yep.
pronouncing that right? Omnibus?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like
Or
a,
it's just a
it's supposed to
massive,
be, yeah, like the master collection. It's like the big,
yeah,
yeah, it's like
yeah.
300 pages.
It's a tome of Too Much Coffee Man. And the
Yep.
cover artwork is great, right? You do your own cover art.
Yeah. And then I have Martin Thomas, who's one of the four people in our little group when we first started publishing together.
Hmm.
I'm still, he does as often as I can, I get him to do the coloring on the covers because he's just
Oh
a
wow.
lot better than I am. I can muscle through coloring, but he makes it sing. So
Well, the colors on the Too Much Coffee Man omnibus, they sing, man. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I
he's a
mean
talent.
the colors are incredible. So definitely, that is a great connection that you have. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great guy to have around. There's no doubt about it. And for people, listening, give the comic book medium a chance and start with this guy. I mean, this is really one of the best books I've
Oh,
read. Is
thank you.
Too Much Coffee Man, Parade of Tirade. It is um, it's a blend of meta, which is a genre that we've sort of coined recently, and I would say that you are one of the first and best to do it. Seriously, I mean,
Well,
I
thank
gotta,
you.
I mean, and that is why it's just so cool to me that we're going to be doing this Fantastic Four soundtrack. Absolutely. So, um, you know what? I I got I got lost upstairs a little bit, so I'm just gonna cycle back. Um, the podcast is about food and music, and you know, you had this character around for such a long time, 2 decades, almost, it is 3 decades, and then you must have gotten crazy offers for things to do with this character, Too Much Coffee Man. However,
Yeah.
you know, uh, you know, coffee really wasn't a bad option. I mean, truly, if I, in some alternate universe or however we describe it now, if I were to create Too Much Coffee Man, especially in this day and age, I would be like, of course I would make an accompanying, of course I would do a coffee. Why wouldn't I, But, you really waited, you took your time, and then finally for basically around the 30th anniversary of Too Much Coffee Man, teamed up with the independent coffee company Rootless Coffee out of
Yeah, they're
Flint,
great.
Michigan. What?
They're
They're great.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I followed up. I did a talk with them. I will include a link. There shall be links. And by the way, there will be a link to Shannon Wheeler's omnibus as well. You would really be doing yourself a favor picking up that book. A coffee table book of Too Much Coffee, man. What more can you ask for? All right, so um, anyway, so Shannon Wheeler teamed up with Rootless Coffee Company. I got to talk to those guys too. There will be a link. So you can listen to that conversation. That conversation has, an undertone. I had to ask them about the Flint, Michigan water crisis and the experience of creating a coffee company after that. However, what Rootless Coffee Company is doing in terms of outreach and including comic book artists in their, coffee bag artwork, because each coffee bag comes with a great piece of art, and half or more of them are drawn by comic book artists. So,
Yeah, I
Shannon,
like them.
yeah, yeah,
I avoided
yeah.
working with a lot of places just because I didn't like the coffee. Yeah, and then or the politics or the people, and they checked off all the boxes for me of liking the people, liking the coffee, and they went and found coffee
Wow.
that was really strong and really tasty. So a good roast. I think they do a good job. But yeah, I've had a
Good
lot
job.
of offers, and
Yeah.
usually it's an LA guy who's telling me how much money we'll make, and it's like, yeah, like that's
Well, that is impressive that you still think like that. It really is. There's no
or
doubt
stupid. I don't know.
about it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, I think ultimately it is good uh that you greenlit this coffee. I mean, I really did. I bought a bag from Rootless Coffee Company. I ordered the bag. It was shipped directly to where I live in Connecticut. It's true. The internet works miracles. And by the way, I have to say the Rootless Coffee Company website is very accessible, easy to shop, and uh, and so I ordered a bag of this coffee that you've released into the world called Hyperspace, and it promised chocolatey undertones with notes of toasted marshmallow, and I believe maybe coconut. Am I wrong? Is there
I,
coconut?
I mean, the thing is, like, it actually was too strong for me. Like, I drank a cup and I was
It is.
wired,
It is
and
strong.
for me to get wired from coffee, I was like, okay, this is because anyway. That's yeah. They did it right. So I thought
They did
if
do
you're
it
gonna do
right.
it too much coffee, man, coffee, it's gotta it's gotta have a kick to it.
And when they said notes of marshmallow, I was like, there's no way. There's no way there's notes of marshmallow. But there were, and to have notes of marshmallow with such a powerful cup of coffee, with milk, no less, or half and half, which I bought specifically to mix with the hyperspace.
But
Um,
it's not a flavored they didn't add flavor. I mean, it's just a straight roast. They searched around for beans and made a
right.
mix that brought this out. Mostly African stuff I that's where I tend to like the coffees.
I mean, do you
Um,
know what beans they were? I,
I I do, and I can't remember off the hand because I knew that was the fall, and it's like, oh, it's yeah, I should go grab it and look.
you
But
know
I
what?
am sensitive to. I mean, that's a funny thing is when I started Too Much Coffee, man, I knew a little bit about coffee,
Right,
but then all of a sudden I had to learn about it. Like I
right,
had to learn roasting, I had to learn bean origin, I had to learn labor practice, just because people expected me to know it.
right,
So,
right.
uh,
Right.
it's
I definitely
uh,
understand that. I mean, here I am with a podcast about food and music. I had a restaurant tour type friend who is one day going to own his own restaurant with his name up top. But wouldn't you know it, our schedules conflict. But I have a friend who's really into the restaurant business, and it was kind of on me to come up with the music side, and
oh, that's great.
I had to get back into practicing and playing music. So I have a
That's
djembe
great.
I've been playing for 6 months now. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
It's gonna be great. I'm really excited about um learning to just play again, like to play for longer than 2 or 3 minutes even, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
at a time is just sort of, it's so great for my mind. Um, and what about you, Shannon? I mean, you must have started up one band and done something.
Um, I should have. I started playing guitar when I had my first kids 20 years ago. I started playing guitar.
Oh wow.
Um, not very good at it, but I thought that music needs to be in their life. And so I thought, I need to bring it into my life to share it with them. And so just learned
Wow.
to play dumb, drop kick me Jesus, uh, through the goalposts of life and songs like that are fun and stupid. But in the pandemic, I started playing piano and ragtime. I love ragtime. So I'm trying to get into playing that. Um,
I just remembered what I was trying to say from earlier. Too much coffee man is an irreverent blend of meta, um, superhero fiction, and personal insight.
sounds about right. I think you got to add neurotic,
I know
self-doubting,
you would
or
add
just
neurotic. Yeah, I know that.
yes.
But wow. Okay, so I had a question about this, and this was really great for me. Was um, before we even started setting up this interview, I realized that I just genuinely had a question for you about your comic book, and so in Too Much Coffee Man, Parade of Tirade.
Mhm.
That book alone, people, you should really pick it up. Too Much Coffee Man fights the supervillain cliche who dishes
Right.
out a list of cliches.
Hmm.
That's just one thing you can expect from it. If you pick up the Too Much Coffee Man omnibus, you'll get to learn about the superheroine Too Much Espresso White Chocolate with Almonds or something like
Too
that.
much German white chocolate woman with almonds. And that, I mean, she came about because I was doing Too Much Coffee Man as a weekly in the newspaper, and people were always telling me these ideas of like, oh, you should do Too Much Iced Tea Man, or you should do, and
Mhm.
I mean, some of them were like Too Much Hershey's Chocolate Man. And it's like,
Yeah,
how do you do that in a way that's not
yeah,
offensive? Like, I
yeah.
don't know. And why they would say this, like that, I should do this. And what does it bring to the table
Yeah,
doing
they're sincerely saying you should do it. Just,
yes, like,
just
oh, here's this
totally
thing.
all that other
So
stuff, whatever. So you can put in Too Much Hershey Chocolate Guy or
so
something.
that's why I thought, okay, what's the dumbest? Let me, put a stopgap on this. And the dumbest I could think of was Too Much German White Chocolate Woman with Almonds, because it was just absurd, right? And
Right.
so then she's the Gracie Allen type character of kind of a foil. Uh,
Yeah.
Say
Well,
goodnight, Gracie is the yeah,
right. Or
yeah,
Too
because
Much Coffee Man. Yeah.
yeah, where she is this kind of innocent, Gracie Allen, if 30s comedian who's just um, anyway,
She's
that's
like a little too real for TV, right? She's like angry. I mean,
yeah, she's
that's how it
got
is.
some anger in her. Everybody has some anger. Yeah,
I mean,
espresso guy is the
I
real
will
bitter
actually,
one though.
I'll share that joke. Uh, the Too Much German White Chocolate Espresso Woman with Almonds. In one of her first appearances, maybe I think this might actually be her first appearance in the Too Much Coffee Man comics. She's working as a waitress at a cafe,
Oh,
and she completely loses it on a customer, and she's like smashing stuff. She's like flipping tables, she's breaking porcelain cups, and Too Much Coffee Man just goes, stop, like, violence isn't the answer. And she goes, what are you talking about? I hate these people, I hate my job.
yeah,
This is the perfect place to smash up.
yeah, it is the answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Going to coffee shops in the '90s, and it was, yeah, just what the privilege that the customers would have and the
Yeah,
tolerance that the baristas would have was always amazing. And then it
right,
just got worse with when Starbucks kicked in and
right.
um but yeah,
You know,
it was
I appreciate you saying that. I think it is worth mentioning. Starbucks isn't perfect, right? I mean, it is a chain. I mean, do they help some people and like their rate is good? I'm sure, but is it harder to be an independent coffee company? Probably, like I would I would guess, like but still, I mean, because coffee is such an amazing uh thing for us, uh, independent coffee is able to flourish, right? I
yeah.
mean, such as your own. Anyway, we've got to try and find a way, honestly. Um, if you get a chance, if the timing looks right, I say get another run of Hyperspace out there, man. You know?
I
Come
do
on.
need to. I do need to.
Yeah. All right. And for our listeners, keep an eye on this new Kickstarter backed release from Shannon Wheeler. I will absolutely post updates um, when the Kickstarter goes live, and we'll follow up on this for sure. And
I love it.
Shannon, thanks again for being here. I think we're just about ready to roll. We're gonna do this Fantastic Four soundtrack. Uh,
Okay.
so just one more quick question to set the stage, kind of a recap. Um, Henry Rollins,
Yeah.
um, the speaker, poet, radio man. He appeared on Hot Ones. It's a great episode. Um, he wrote the foreword for your original run of Too Much Coffee Man Parade of Tirade, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, can
I think it
you
was Parade. Yeah.
talk about like bringing that to fruition, and
Um,
maybe also
yeah.
time you got to the last time you spoke to him, because I'm curious what you talked to Henry Rollins about. There's no question. There's no doubt in my, I definitely want to know that stuff.
Um, he called me up years ago. God, what year must have that been? In the 90s or something. And he called up asking if I did freelance work, if I would do covers and all that. And I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, sure. And I chatted with him for a little bit. And I was like, Henry Rollins. I was like, you're not the Henry Rollins. He's like, well, how many of us are there? And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, that's Henry Rollins. So yeah, I illustrated
How many of us are there?
his one of his books. I did the cover and all that. And then I just asked him, I was like, hey, if I when I do a book collection, would you be up for writing an intro? And he said his schedule was booked for like a year. So I said, oh, great. How about a year out? You do? And he's like, God damn, okay. But no, he's a super generous guy and yeah, just phenomenal. And yeah, we'd gab on the phone when I was doing these. It was a collection of interviews where he would go to like Jerry Lee Lewis's house and hang out with him and write. He wrote a series of essays
Right,
and he's just really generous and complimentary of other musicians
right,
and
right.
yeah he feels lucky to do what he's worked his ass off on all this, so I think he deserves his success, but he
Definitely. Yeah.
he
Yeah. I have
the
to say,
amount of generosity and belief he has in other people is really amazing.
absolutely. I mean, some of the things he says because of that really, they really get to you, like I've definitely been moved by some of the ideas that Henry Rollins puts out there into the universe.
Yeah,
What I
he's a
will
good
say
guy.
though
I think it's
is
genuine.
for his episode of Hot Ones,
Hmm.
I understand he said he oftentimes makes a dinner of like rice and eggs,
Hmm.
and he doesn't like I guess he said he makes the whole thing in the microwave or something.
I don't know.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
like I mean, I would do that. I think it's a good idea sometimes because sometimes you just don't want to think too hard about what you're gonna
And
have for dinner. But
some of it's
that's
shtick too. I mean,
yeah,
he's got a, he's putting on show, and it's funny.
All right, yeah, yeah. I hope he treats himself to a steak once in a while. I mean, seriously. I mean, do a spoken word poetry tour. You're not gonna get a nice meal for
No,
yourself.
and he does. He's lasted this long in part because he takes care of himself. So I'm sure he eats very, very well.
That's very true. That's very true. I actually appreciate you pointing that out. Yeah. So this is really great to be able to reflect on your coffee hyperspace. After literally the first time I got to talk to you, you were taste testing
Oh,
uh,
funny, yeah.
potential batches for hyperspace. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I couldn't believe that's where we found you, and you talked about learning about coffee. I mean, amazing. All right, let's do it, man. The
Okay.
Fantastic Four soundtrack, the original four. And I got to throw this in, Shannon. As I was setting up for
Uh-huh.
this interview, I saw a spider like under my desk. It was haunting. And so I'm gonna have to throw in a couple questions about Spider-Man. Uh,
Okay.
but let's get rolling. Fantastic Four. You started imagining your own soundtrack. Tell me everything.
I mean, Brian Eno to me would be the guy to do the soundtrack because he does
Wow,
the weird space music,
wow,
which would be appropriate for the negative zone and their time travel and kind of when Kirby was let
okay,
loose and he would do these very surreal Inhumans. What is it? Ankylos? I can't remember the negative zone villain, but um, yeah, and some of the I mean, it's very,
Doctor
it's
Doom.
very,
So
yeah,
as
very
soon as
Brian
I think of
Eno.
the Doctor Doom part of the equation, that's where I'm like, oh, of course, Brian Eno. Like, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, of course, of course.
And
Uh,
then, doing all the surreal, like taking Tiger Mountain and all that. It's very grounded and Babies on Fire has that, yeah, it just kind of hits that Fantastic Four when it gets frenetic, and where there's I don't know. So Eno kind of covers it musically in a nice way. But what I was thinking with the Fantastic Four is, my theory on it, and this is completely based on reality, not at all. Like I have no facts to back up this theory, but I think Stan Lee went into Kirby and said, "Hey, I'm working on this comic with four people that go into outer space and they come back and they get powers, like earth, air, fire, and water. So you've got like
right,
the rock
right,
guy, the water person that's like a rubber band or waterish,
right,
the air person who can, and so he just sort of blew this as this basic storyline, and then Kirby would draw it without
right,
any words, and then
right.
Stan would come back in and just say, like, "Oh my God, I'm catching on fire," and it's like, and he would just make up these words to fit with a visual storytelling. So I thought Earth, Air, Fire, and Water should be doing, although
Oh,
it doesn't really fit, except in the '70s kind of way.
you mean Earth,
But
Wind, and
I'm a
Fire?
Rock, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Yeah. Yes, '70s. Yes. I don't know
I
what
mean,
happened to Water in their band. Anyways, did they just kick out Water?
it's a
That's got to
reasonable
be.
question, but I think
That's like a dad joke. It's terrible.
it is a dad joke, but it is the hook. I mean, they must have talked about it.
Oh
Seriously.
yeah, of
I mean,
course.
you said your theory of history. I mean, absolutely. I'm sure Earth, Wind, and Fire was like, should we include water as well? You know?
And by leaving it out, though, it creates an unfinished painting that you wonder
A
about, and then
question
it
mark
has a
in your
better,
mind.
yeah, so it works better. But their music doesn't really fit. I don't know, maybe on some of the Human Torch stuff,
Like
but
like
I'm a
on a
Rock
cartoon
is kind of
thing. Yeah,
perfect. The Simon and Garfunkel, I'm a
totally.
Rock,
Yes.
stupid song for the thing. Um, that is a
Yeah.
terrible song, but I do love it.
It's sort
But
of
it
like
fits
it's
with,
like when you hear it on the radio, you're just like, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, I am a rock. Yeah, that is a. I mean, but
Simon Island. Yeah,
So,
it's
so
terrible.
I should
They
throw
were,
this.
uh-huh.
Don't give up on me, man. We're gonna do the rest of the soundtrack. I'm telling you. And really, if there are songs you want, I think you should manifest it. You should make it real. Like I know there's got to be some songs in there, man. I know it. I know it. So, real quick, I want to throw this in. You mentioned the thing. Um,
Hmm.
when I first talked to you about this, I'm actually remembering it now. It was like again, for our listeners, we did this earlier podcast recording and had to scrap it due to technical difficulties. However, Shannon and I have gotten to talk before, and this is so pleasant getting to talk to him again. But so for you know, we're talking to Shannon Wheeler for the first time, and I have to ask him what comic he would do from Marvel or DC if he had his way, like if he really just got to do whatever he wanted. And he picked Fantastic Four, and I thought it was so great. And without question, I would pick up a Fantastic Four book with Shannon Wheeler's name on the cover. And I would tell my
They had
friends,
they
I
had a
mean, come
family
on.
dynamic that I loved. And that
Yeah.
was, their internal, where the Thing and the Human Torch, it was the nuclear family that I wanted. I wanted to have that little, you know, mother,
Yeah.
father, sibling, like that,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. And your style of cartooning, no less, lent to those characters. Because you have an interesting style of shading. We've talked about this before. You have a drawing style called cross hatching, and like literally, it's sort of it's like these crisscrossed. It does look similar to a hashtag, you know, but it's like this crisscross style
mhm,
of shading, so when you're looking into, like, say, a shadowy corner, right? There's a corner right
mhm,
here, say Spider-Man or whoever is lurking in the corner, all the shadows would be in this, like, kind of crazy, two swipes this way, two swipes back. You know,
yeah,
it's a time-consuming thing. It must take time, but it's an interesting
it
way to
is, but it's
spend.
also meditative. So you can
It's
really,
meditative.
yeah,
Wow.
I like it. When I went to the New Yorker, I had to move away from, I didn't have to, but I chose to work on a simplified style,
Right.
in order to accommodate and
Right.
kind of work in there. And people have asked, they're like, oh, you're drawing differently, you're writing differently for the New Yorker. Um, that's is that a compromise? And it's like, no, like doing my comics is playing CBGBs, where it's underground punk rock, or whatever I feel like, and it's trying to
Hmm.
hit these strong emotions. But
Right.
going to the New Yorker is
Right.
playing Blue Note, where you're playing jazz, and you want to,
Right. Right.
you're not going to hit power chords at Blue Note. You're going to work on these diminished scales and stuff. So you're
Right.
going to work with the subtlety and narratives that are really different.
Have you ever seen Jazz in New York? Because it is great.
I would love to. No, that I should have gone to the Blue
So,
Note.
so we're starting to work on video segments for the Lemon Drop sessions.
Ooh,
So if you come out to New York City, I mean, maybe let me know. Really, we could
I
make,
I would
make some
love that.
cinema. It would be
I'm
really
I'm finally I'm getting to
really
be
cool.
jazz years old. I'm old enough to start liking and appreciating jazz.
Exactly. You should just lean in. Just let
It's
it happen to
terrible.
you. Let it happen to you.
I did do a cover for Blue Note once. I
Oh wow.
the guy that did Three is the Magic Number, Multiplication Rock. He did an album with a Too Much Coffee Man song in it. He did it for um,
Right.
when I optioned my character to Nirvana. They wanted a soundtrack, and I said, get somebody like Vince Guaraldi. Um, and then they
So
they
there's a Too
pulled
Much
in.
Coffee
Let's see if I
Man
got it.
soundtrack. No,
Yeah, uh,
unbelievable. I
yeah. Here, Bob Duro. And yeah, so Yeah, and I did that
So Bob
for
Giraud
them.
made a Too Much Coffee Man soundtrack.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so
and it
I
was
I was gonna
specifically for the cartoon that never happened, but
I was gonna
um,
start doing
yeah,
album
it was great.
reviews, so I'm gonna review that album pronto tanto. You
Sweet.
don't you don't even have to be there. I'm just gonna review the I'm just gonna review the album. um,
Yeah, that was a highlight, but
I am thrilled.
you know,
That's an amazing highlight.
and
Your
that's one of the
Wikipedia page
privileges of
isn't perfect, man. There's some stuff
oh,
missing. Like,
not even close, and we've tried to fix it. Um,
right.
no,
I never even thought
it's
that's the thing I
weird
never
how many
even
things
thought of.
are
I
wrong with
never think
it.
about you having to try and fix your Wikipedia. I mean, I do not think about that, but it's a real thing that you have to
I had
deal with.
my girlfriend get in there. Well, you can't do your
Yeah.
own, so I had my girlfriend go in and do it, and then
Right.
somebody
You
kept
can't do your
undoing
own.
all the corrections that she was making, and finally she started corresponding with the person. He thought that that was me doing it, and she's like, no, I know, I live with him. This is not him, and I know that this is
Wow.
true and this is not true, and like I have firsthand knowledge. I'm not trying to sell his books. I'm trying to
Wow.
just get accurate, but it's gotten sloppy again. There's mistakes in there.
No, I understand. I've got to sneak this question in, right? In the
Hmm.
Too Much Coffee Man parade of tirade. I mean, I'm curious about how you wrote the whole thing. You could make a behind the scenes documentary if you wanted, but you know, um, Too Much Coffee Man, Parade of Tirade. First of all, for our listeners, I want to throw in one more anecdote. You actually like changed the numbers on your Too Much Coffee Man, Parade of Tirade. These are the first issues of the comic book that came out, and you changed the numbers so it looked like two issues were literally just missing, right?
Oh
It
yeah, well,
stops off at 5 and then starts again at 7, but it's really
yeah, I
like
skipped them. No, I didn't change the numbers. What I did is I was working on number 6, and I
right,
was so bored with it because I knew where I wanted it to go. I'd had
right,
this arc where
right,
I wanted the cartoonist to slowly become more successful. I broke it into 3 stories.
right,
A Too Much Coffee Man, the artist, and then a reader. And I wanted the reader to slowly fail
right,
and become homeless. Um,
right.
and 6 was just like
Oh,
a color
the
by
comic book
numbers.
reader slowly fails and becomes homeless. I get
Yeah.
that joke.
And I could, then yeah, I mean, that's where the meta stuff is, or deconstructivist.
Right,
But
because the character you're a character in the book and you're a character ish. It's a facsimile
yeah,
or something like that. But basically the creator of Too Much Coffee Man is in the book and
yeah,
he meets the reader at
yeah,
his worst.
yeah,
The reader asks the comic book creator for money, right?
right. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right,
And they don't recognize each other. Um, yeah, I'm both the reader and the artist, and it's just different
right,
aspects. But it was a way to sort of make commentary about promotion and different things. But yeah, it was boring
right.
doing number 6, and I didn't like it. And then I thought, well, why am I doing it if I'm bored with it? And originally I thought I should just skip ahead in the story, but that didn't feel right because I wanted it paced
Hmm.
evenly. And then I
Hmm.
thought, well, why not just skip these 2 numbers? And so yeah, those 2 comic books don't exist. So I went from number 5, and then I picked it up again at the end of the story because that's
Right,
what I wanted to draw. And so
right, right.
those are the rarest comic books ever, is how I didn't sell them.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, and it's a funny idea, but then it also, it
there was
hurt
genuine,
collectors. Yeah,
yeah,
like I mean, it made it,
confusion.
I shot myself in the foot. It's still
Well,
funny though, so screw it. I
it
don't
is
care.
that, so I think it is still funny, and it is possible that it's a little funny because you shot yourself in the foot so
Yeah,
hard. It's
it's
like, I mean,
definitely.
but
Yeah, I
I
commit to a
mean,
bit.
it was absolutely. I think it was a joke worth telling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, now this moment that I'm going to refer to from Parade of Tirade and it's a tough, tough to choose from this list. But I have to single out this moment. This is the moment that really made me go, I got to talk to him about this. I got to ask him this question, right? So there's a comic book creator character in Too
Hmm.
Much Coffee Man, right?
Hmm.
And then there's Too Much Coffee Man himself on his own adventures, and then there's the comic book reader, like you said.
Yep.
And uh, in the comic book creator section, you know, which when I first read the comic book, I was like, uh-oh, like now we're going into the comic book creator, and like the sort of the meta stuff, how's this going to work? Am I going to keep reading this book? And I definitely kept reading the book. Um, the comic book creator goes through, you literally take us through the comic book creator, you know, folding and stapling his own comics, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
literally just the very menial work of like packaging these comic books and
Yep.
selling them literally to the local comic book store,
Yeah.
just goes to the local comic book store and asks the comic book store owner guy if he'll, put up the comic books like in the store,
Yep.
and making what profit he makes, which in the comic book is like 81 cents.
Exactly. Yeah. That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, right. So you say that's about right. And I do want to add, you're gonna start a Kickstarter soon. And you don't try to sell just any old idea, like, you really pick your battles and try to create the best possible stories. And that's awesome. And
I
so
appreciate that.
too Much Coffee Man, Parade of Tirade, the comic book creator literally goes through this sequence where he's folding and stapling his comic
Hmm.
books, and he cannot figure out what to draw. And he just looks at the TV, right? He
Right.
just like looks over at the TV, and then the panel is so big, you just see that TV, right? And then he beats the TV. He looks away and goes back to stapling his comic books and getting them to the printer or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
That was, yeah, those were
right.
when I started by doing mini comics, and that was, it really was photocopying onto 8.5 by 11, folding it twice and
Hmm.
stapling it.
Hmm.
And then I I started selling at a local shop. I was selling at the comic store, and then there was a bookstore, Europa Books, that put them on the counter. And then I had a buddy that I became friends with, a guy at the photocopy place. So he was doing color copies for me. So I'd do a color
Right.
cover, and I couldn't keep up because they started selling better
Right.
and better at the bookstore, especially.
Right.
And then I worked
Hmm.
for a printer, and he said, "Oh, I could print those up for you." And
Hmm.
so I printed up 10,000 of them. And he said they'd be cheaper if you staple them yourself. So I stapled the first uh, 10,000 copies myself.
Wow.
And I swore I would never do it again. I was like, and then I sold out fairly quickly. I
Right.
started going through distributors. And so I did a second run of 12,000, and I stapled all those
Right.
myself too.
Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
that's what I wanted to communicate a little bit in that book
Wow.
was, it takes not being afraid of doing the work. Like, you have to
Right.
staple 10,000 mini comics yourself if you want to do it. It's
Wow.
just, I don't think there's a way around it. And
Right.
maybe there is for some people, but not for
I
me.
mean, it's really amazing what our mind does to avoid stapling 12,000 mini comics, right?
It's fine. I mean, uh, I was working at a video store, and I just get iClaudius, and I sit there and watch iClaudius while I staple. three
Is
days
that
of
a good
stapling is
movie
all
or is
it
it
was.
boring or it's like
It's kind of boring. It's like a BBC, history of the Romans